Hi everybody, I'm Suzanne, and in today's video we're going to do a posthumous portrait of a little dog named Charlie. Now here's a reference that we'll be using to do Charlie's portrait, and you can tell by looking at the photo reference that he looks like he's probably a Schnauzer mix. But look at those eyes, those doughy eyes are going to be so much fun to paint. So we're going to jump into that here in just a minute. So as always, if you are my subscribers, thank you so much. And if you're not, please consider subscribing. And if you like this sort of video but want to see something a little bit more intense, a little bit more in detail, then please check out my Patreon channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Charlie's portrait. Now here's our setup for today. I went ahead and just did a very rough sketch of Charlie. And just so I have my bearings on this piece, I can already say there's some little corrections, and I keep just kind of tweaking it up, but I've got the basic idea. So here's Mr. Charlie over here on the monitor, and here is our starting palette lineup. So I've got King's Blue, I've got Italian Green Umber, Ultramarine Blue, Ivory Black, White, and I've got, this is Payne's Gray. I got some more Titanium White, and then I have some warm colors here. What do I have? It's I have Indian Brown Ochre, Michael Harding. I have Burnt Umber and Raw Umber, also Michael Harding. So yeah, here we go. We're gonna do this little piece of Charlie. Charlie was a dear loved pup of a particular person that that has followed me on both Instagram and on YouTube, and I was sorry to hear that he just recently passed. So I really wanted to get this to her right away. I know that loss, so we're going to go ahead and try to give Charlie, we're going to honor Charlie in this portrait. Today's painting is being painted on a super smooth substrate, and it's a gessoed masonite panel. And what I'm doing here is I'm just blocking in where everything's going. So it's almost like a light sketch. I'm using very little paint, just enough to where I can see where everything's going. And at this point of the game, I can actually wipe it right off, as this substrate is super smooth. But I am just kind of getting an idea where Charlie's going in and popping in all the color. Now I'm going to want to go ahead and block in, so I want the background in. And what I'm mixing here is Titanium White, King's Blue, a little Payne's Gray, and some Raw Umber. And I'm using a large fluffy soft brush to get in where I want this gray background to go. And this is just the preliminary background color, as I'll be adding some red into it later and kind of just using a little bit more color just to make it more interesting. And I'm just, again, continuing blocking in and getting all the colors in as I can. A lot of paint on top, and this particular dog has, I believe Charlie is a Schnauzer mix, so he's got that long outer wiry coat. So I'm actually having to paint the undercoat in first, and I'm constantly checking my angles. That's why you'll see me putting my brush up against the painting, and I'm comparing it to the actual reference photo. And I'm putting in the brown colors. Now there is a lot of under brown, if that makes sense, to Charlie's coat. So I am layering in that paint now. And I'm using all the warm colors I I mentioned in the beginning of the video on as far as what the palette is. I believe it's the brown ochre and the raw umber and the burnt umber, and you could see me mixing it there to the right. I'm doing all my mixing there and just layering it in, but I have to put that solid brown colors in first so I can put the long lighter gray and silver color fur on top. So all that has to be layered in, but it all has to be done in stages. And because I want to watch out for my values to be, I don't want them to be too close, so I have to darken up areas around the face. And you can see I just added a whole bunch of color to that background. And as Lapika had said, that she usually dressed Charlie in a lot of red, and she wanted to include some red in the background. And that's one of the wonderful things about my job, is working with my clients to make sure that this is going to be even more personal. Since this is a posthumous portrait, I know she misses her dog so much, and I want to be able to create exactly what she wants. And knowing that she wants the reds in the background, well, that's what she's getting. Long filbert and starting to put in some of the other colors. So you're starting to get a feeling now that this dog has long guard hairs or longer hairs on top of the other hairs. This is a scruffy dog, a scruffy boy. So we're wanting to create that texture. And by putting the darker values down first, we can put the lighter values on top. And I keep going back and forth between the lighter and darker values. So you can see in some of the areas of the dog's face, I did put a little bit too much white, but don't worry, it'll all adjust. And I'm throwing down, obviously I was showing you some paint. I think I did add some burnt sienna to the palette, as well as, and I keep refreshing my palette, so that's why you keep seeing tubes of paint flying by here. So, but it's the same colors that we started with, and I do eventually add a little bit of the cadmium red as I mix that with the ivory black to do the brown, to make the lively brown part of the iris of the eyes. And of course I needed the alizarin crimson to add to the painting because she wanted the reds in the background. But those are the two colors I did eventually add. And again, I'm just kind of popping in color where it needs to be. So this is still in the very beginning stages of this painting. And I'm going to go ahead and throw up a little bit of, so you can see the reference here. And here is, here's little Charlie. Now in the reference, he does look browner. And that's how he ends up looking, except I have really bright light on my palette. On my easel that's shining down on this. So it doesn't look quite as brown, but trust me, I have the colors looking like little Charlie's colors here. And I'm using where I need it to be soft. I'm using a larger brush and kind of using a very light stroke, meaning I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the brush when I need it to be soft. So you can see I'm making that part of Charlie's body, the actual shoulder and chest area, pretty soft at this point. And again, still I'm just putting in the dark values wherever I see them and trying to get everything where it needs to go. But I really do feel pretty confident at this point that Charlie's looking pretty good and coming around. eyes are always my favorite part. I just really enjoy that. So keep in mind the eyeball is like a little marble in a socket. So we want to create the roundness of the actual eyeball. So when we do the reflection, and you can see that very light area on the outside part of the eyeball, that's where the shine, the light is picking up on it. And you can see that deep reddish brown color that I've mixed. That is the combination of cadmium red and ivory black. And I'm using the paint scraper to scrape out some of the paint so I can put that highlight in the eye area. And so believe it or not, that is not white. It looks very white here on the monitor, but it's actually a King's Blue white mixture. And just kind of popping in everything where it needs to go. And I'm looking at all the light values that help form the actual shape of the eye socket. And so you can see I'm using this, this is a #1 pointed round eclipse that I'm using here, and just popping in those little lighter hairs and wanting to put the detail in the areas of the dog's face that I want the eye to be drawn to, of course, that being the eyes. So I tend to go a little bit more detailed in the eye area because that's the fun part. I'm always flipping my painting, my canvas around when I need to, and so I'm wanting the hairs on that side of the body because my wrist moves better in that direction. I can flip the substrate over and create a more believable hair. And of course, I'm always using that brush to line everything up, making sure the eyes, nostrils, all those are all following the same plane as the actual references. So you can see I moved the nose over a little bit. And so I'm always checking. So we're going to drop this down just a little bit so you can see a little bit more of the detail in the nose area. So when working on the little nose, you know, after I'm pretty sure that I have the actual structure in the right place, then I can work on the interior structures like the actual nostrils, and you see how I can pull that out just a little bit more. I am using a #1 Eclipse filbert here to create this, and there's a subtlety it's kind of I actually used ivory black and burnt umber to make this color with just a little bit of white in it, just a tiny bit. And so you can see the nostrils, and you can see the top of the nose and the bottom, you know, you can see all the structures. And so yeah, putting everything in, moving stuff around if need be, but it's all falling into place. Always fun putting in the detail, and so I've got to put the little dark values in around the nose and the muzzle area before I can actually put the lighter hairs on top. And I see that I'm going to actually move out that right side of the muzzle over a little bit. I will eventually, I'll get there, but so all right, putting in the detail in the nose area and forming everything, because there's going to be little hairs that poke out on the sides or the top of that nose as well, and putting in the light shiny, you know, because the noses are wet, so putting in all the little fun shine and bringing out that little mouth here and just getting it all in, and I'm starting to see little Charlie smiling. He's coming through this substrate, and I love it. I love to see when my paintings start to come alive. to get that other eye. So again, I'm going in with a pretty small brush here and putting in that combination of the cadmium red and ivory black, getting the eyeball and using my paint scraper to scrape out other areas of the eye where I don't really want my light colors to become meh, too muddy. And so again, the highlight in the eye is it's a King's blue and white mixture, and putting in the pupil and behind the shine and making sure that I have all my shapes correct. And so if I see something that has to be adjusted on one side, I'll go ahead and fix what I need to on the other. So I go back and forth between the two eyes, but I'm pretty confident that I have everything and the shapes are going in correctly. And there we go. You're starting to see the blue coming out a little bit more in the eye shine. And yeah, so getting all the details in. And once I feel like I have the eyes in, then everything it starts to fall into place for me. And at this point, we're still not even halfway through. Now I'm adding a little bit more cad red on the very lower part of the iris because of the way, as I mentioned before, since we know we're dealing with little eye balls, the light hits that part of the eye a little bit more. So I intensify that part, and now you can really see the light inside of the eyes, so you can see the brown iris. And yeah, so there it is. He's coming together. Okay, I'm using a 1/4 inch rosemary ivory dagger. I'm using a little bit of the Italian green umber and white. I'm going to go in with a little bit more straight white. Gotta put a little oil in it though. Put down a little bit of linseed oil. It helps that this is a few days dry. And so now I can actually stack some of this color on top. Italian green umber and titanium white makes a great mixture. I'm going to go a little bit darker. A little bit of this. A little bit of the yellow ochre. Some of the internal dark colors in here. I don't want them as quite as white as some of the other places, because it's set back a little bit. I want to get onto the inside, but I'm a little afraid. I don't want to, because there's so much going on in here. A little bit of oil. She's got to take a little bit of raw umber. Now my colors, I just leave them out. I just left my palette out, and it's getting kind of dry. I would tell you that it's probably better to either seal them up, put them in the fridge or something if you're going to leave your paints for a little while. And some more brown. Yeah. So I'm mixing a little bit of raw umber into the titanium white and Payne's gray mixture. There's a little bit of that color here. I'm gonna assume since this is dry I can do this. I'm going to use the tip of this brush. So where a color is on a lighter background, it will appear darker, and that's why I went up here and did this little loop where the hair comes down. See, I'm really going to town with this little ivory dagger, and you know, I can use a shorter stroke to get the little hairs there around the eye, and you can see I'm actually rolling my edges, meaning I'm following the contours of Charlie's face so that the hairs make sense, so they're all falling in the direction that they need to be falling. So I will actually be, you know, there's a lot of finessing with your wrist when you're doing this kind of stroke. You're actually moving that brush. And here's where I was talking about moving that muzzle over just a little bit. And I'm putting in the light hairs, but you're going to get a really good idea of how I have to layer the area around the muzzle. So right there on the bridge of his nose, he's got this really light hair, but the dark hair goes up into it. So here I am layering the dark hairs over top of the white hairs, and again, finessing that brush to make sure that it rolls with the actual contours of his muzzle and his, the bridge of his nose, and then putting the dark hairs on top. So it's kind of opposite of the way I often do things, but it made sense in this particular Okay, using a 1/4 inch rosemary ivory dagger, I'm going to start doing some of the hairs here. And sometimes I'll be flipping this over. And I'm going to work on this ear here. has a lot of different texture of hair. So I'm using just a little short strokes here on his chest or his shoulders here. You can see I'm using a very short stroke, and I'm creating the kind of that wiry, coarse, textured hair of a Schnauzer over his shoulder. It's short. He's been clipped or groomed that way. So I've got to keep that pretty short, and I'm just using an Eclipse long filbert to do that. And you can see I'm putting some of the lighter hairs and highlights in his fur. And again, keeping the strokes super short and tight. And again, when I need to, I use a lot less pressure on my brush. And going in now using the Eclipse, I'm sorry, it's actually an ivory dagger. I'm putting in some of the longer hairs. Now, I realize at some point that I've got to shorten that ear up just a tad on the right, because I can see where it's a little too long. And you'll see I'll actually shorten it up by just using a darker value and taking off some of that paint. But meanwhile, I'm just working on this little fun, this kind of a beard, I guess, and his eyebrows and all those fun hairs using this ivory dagger. Just popping those hairs in. It's a lot of fun. This is where I get excited when it's the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm starting to see where it's nearing its completion when I start doing all the fine details like this with the daggers. But I'm putting in some of the longer hair, so you can see the texture is completely different than what I was painting on his shoulder, because he's got the longer hairs up here. And yeah, so depending on what type of hair is, adjusted my brushes and the length of stroke and the amount of pressure put on the brush. I realized that the ear is just a little too long, because I'm actually taking I'm lining it up with the eye and say, oops, we got to take some of that ear off. So I just shortened his little ear up, and now it's in the right place. And so there is always a lot of tweaking whenever I'm painting. I guess, a lot of artists are a lot better about doing more accurate sketches than I am, perhaps, but I usually catch it in the midst of the painting process. I would say that I'm actually, that's what keeps things fun and fresh for me. I guess, everybody has a different style and a way of doing things. I tend to be a little bit more flying by the seat of my pants. swapped out my dagger brush for a little fine rigger, and I'm doing all the little hairs, the little short hairs that's in amongst the eye area. Just like I did on the left, I'm doing the same thing on the right. So you can see I'm using a very small short stroke, and I'm creating that area right there close to the eyelid itself. And you'll see that I'll actually, if I felt like I got a little too white in some areas, I may go back and put a little bit more dark values using that brush in between areas. So you can see here I'm bringing a little bit more of that dark down, and I'm still using that little rigger brush. Using that little, well, here I am using the ivory dagger just a little bit more, flipping my substrate over and making it easier for my wrist to move in that direction. But you can see instead of starting from the base of the hair, in some cases I actually start with the terminal end of a hair, as I am here, and go towards the base. So, but keep in mind that if you're starting with the terminal end of a hair, you've got to have a very light hand. You don't want to jump in with a heavy hand or you're going to have a really thick hair. So yeah, so knowing if you're flipping back and forth like I am here, you better know how to adjust the texture or the pressure that you're putting on your brush to create that fineness of the terminal end of a hair. And yeah, so I'm getting close to the end. I am getting very, very close, and I am seeing that little scruffy face coming right off this substrate, and he's looking pretty good. And yeah, he's almost done, and I will let you just enjoy the rest of this. Remember, guys, if there's any questions about anything you're seeing me cover in today's video, don't hesitate to ask questions. Just leave it in the comments section and I'll get to it. And if you like to see this sort of thing, but want them a little bit more detailed, be sure to check out my Patreon page, and I'd love to see you there. Okay, so enjoy. And I think we're done. So you can see, you know, I had to get a lot of the details in with a smaller brush, and the way the hair curls and rolls over Charlie's eyes. I ended up using a rosemary zero ivory rigger. You can see it looks pretty rough there, but it will refine to a nice tip, and that's what I used actually to do a lot of the hairs and to sign the piece. Did use the one of the sword brushes to do a lot of the hairs in the face as well. And like I said, the client did ask that I include some red in the background, just because she dressed Charlie a lot in red. So we'll go ahead and zoom in a little closer. And you know, the eyes were what was so fun on this piece. I really wanted his eyes to be lively. I'm looking forward to when this dries so I can varnish it, because I know a lot of the subtle colors that are in his face will really bounce when he lightens up. I mean, when I varnish him. So there you have it. I really did enjoy doing this particular piece of Charlie. You can see the palette is a mess, but like I started with the beginning, the only colors I really did add, I think I did add the cadmium red to go ahead and add to ivory black to do the eyes. Of course, we put the alizarin crimson was mainly to add it to the background because the client did want some red in the background. And but there you go. And here's a picture of Charlie. And then we have the painting of Charlie. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you did, give me a thumbs up. And here's the completed piece. Now, you can see this was so much fun to paint, and I really did have a ball with those eyes. Those eyes were just so fun. And Charlie had very expressive eyes. And I'm hoping that this portrait of Charlie brings Lapika, his very special person, some peace and some solace in just having his portrait. And again, folks,
if you are considering having a portrait done, I'd be glad to take care of that for you. I know how special our pets are to us, and trust me, if you've watched my videos, you remember Phoebe, and now you know Singer. So yes, our pets are very special to us, and I hope that Lapika does enjoy the painting of Charlie. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and if you are my subscribers, as always, thank you so very much. And if you're not, I hope you consider subscribing very soon. And yeah, what are you waiting for? Just jump on. We'll have a good time. And you can also ring that bell, and you'll know when the next video comes out. So from Kingsport, Tennessee, I want to say thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.